All right, welcome everybody. It looks like we've got a whole slew of people coming in from the waiting room. So we'll give everyone maybe a minute or two while they sign in. But also just wanted to welcome our guest, and I guess I'll host, you present, but we'll keep this an open dialogue. AJ, good to see you.
Likewise, man. I hope everything's going well. I know it's a little crazy, hectic getting into, gosh, a week before Christmas. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of, have one last, I don't know if this is your last one for the year, but kind of feels like it'll be my last one for the year. So yeah, I definitely appreciate the invite.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, it'll definitely be our last one for the year. And yeah, I think I don't know,
Thank
whatever the
goodness.
vibe is out there, I've just been getting vibes that everyone's just like, get me to the holidays. I need to like
I'm tapping out.
recharge and get ready for 2025. So but yes, welcome everybody. We're gonna get started here. If you're just jumping in, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A section down below. We will keep this a little bit more informal in the sense that we will do some back and forth. We'll answer questions along the way. We will try and set aside some time towards the end to tackle any questions. But yeah, AJ and I are going to kind of step through this. And I think to kick things off, AJ, you have built a really awesome remodeling company, but then you also are starting to build a software company, which I don't envy you there. I know that's a really challenging thing, but you guys have been doing some amazing stuff with Render. Um, I actually invested in the company because I saw what you guys were doing, and I think it can help a ton of people improve in that sales process for a number of different reasons. But I thought it would be helpful just to have you share a little bit of your history with scaling up the remodeling company, and then like how did Render come into existence? And then for everyone that is on the webinar today, we're gonna just do like a pull back the curtain, go behind the scenes, look at how you guys have applied this software, but also just the methodology to really accelerate that sales pipeline and throughput. So with that, welcome, and I'll let you kind of kick it off.
Yeah, sure. A full disclaimer. Yeah, I'm hoping to talk primarily about the 2 year process that has taken us to kind of perfect our sales process. Render is a huge part of it. So for those of you who are listening, this is definitely not going to be a Render sales pitch. It's more or less, over the last 2 years at Cornerstone. So my whole upbringing was in construction. I started my remodeling business back in 2011. I quit my job when my wife was pregnant with our firstborn, and we launched Cornerstone. So, if there's anything to be said of taking risks, I'm right there doing it. But obviously, going into 2020, 2020 was the year that we decided at Cornerstone that we wanted to grow past that next glass ceiling, and of course, COVID. uh, you know, we were shut down for 2 months. We were still getting calls for people asking, hey, we want to remodel our space. We're stuck. We're quarantined. We hate our kitchen now. But they didn't want us to come into the home. So we got creative that year. When I say we, me and my design team said, okay, can we sell remodeling projects remotely? Like, is it possible that we could, uh, you know, create a design and estimate the project without actually being inside the client's home? Because ultimately we were challenging our own beliefs about what we needed to be able to sell the project, right? So this is where it all began. When we started to question things like, okay, do we need to be within an eighth of an inch accuracy because that's how we build our designs, right? Um, we're like, well, if we get pictures from a client of space, can we actually just scale this thing? Like, that's a 2 foot dishwasher to 2 foot, 4 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot, maybe in a little. We started to realize that, okay, yes, we can actually bid a kitchen job within reason, uh, very healthily from the outset. Like, okay, well, a filler or an extra 6 inches on a cabin's not really going to tank my budget. So we started to do this. We added $1 million worth of revenue to our company that year, selling completely remotely. We won the Case Entrepreneur of the Year award for this idea, and of course, that kind of springboarded in this idea of like, well, okay, this type of solution doesn't exist yet for the home improvement industry, and that's when we began Render. Flash forward 2 years now, or four, 2 years, I say, because we
Goes
started the
fast,
company
yeah.
in 2022 is when we actually started, kind of building Render out. Um, you know, come forward 2 years, it's actually, we're focused on with Render, it's still a remote engagement tool. So you can actually invite a client to scan their space and it builds a digital floor plan for you and it's got all your 3D elevations and stuff. It's pretty cool. So we're really actually focused Render. We have been focusing Render more on workflow enhancements. So what do I do with that data? Where do I put it? Like, Render's not a design software. It's not an estimation software. Like every contractor has their own tech stack and they want to work in that tech stack because they spend a lot of time and money and effort in training their staff on that tech stack. Can Render plug and play with as many softwares out there? So we're focused on like pushing all this data into CAD software, pushing all this data into estimation software, and all of it's based on my knowledge of how I like to bid projects in the design build space. So while I'm building all this stuff at Render, I have had my work cut out for me at Cornerstone because, as anybody on this call probably knows, when you build a company, when you scale it up, whether you're at that $1 million revenue or you get it up to that two, and then the next one's like at four, maybe 5 million. And when you want to scale up again, you know that it's not just about taking one thing and multiplying it by two. Like that's a business killer. When you want to scale a business, and maybe this is a little bit of a framework for the conversation today, right? So we everyone can understand a little bit about what we're talking about. Um, when you want to scale your business, you really have to understand your bottlenecks, right? So, for example, if you have $1,000 ad budget a month and you wanted to get a certain amount of leads, it's going to give you a certain amount of leads. And if you want to increase your top line revenue, you have a couple options right there, right? You can double your ad budget, right? So you can increase your leads. You can increase your closing percentage. You can decrease the amount of time that it takes you to sell a job in your pipeline. You can raise your average job price. You know, most folks on this call are going to understand like capacity limits of their team's ability or their own individual ability to sell jobs at a higher volume. So even increasing like a closing percentage, for example, requires more effort, more dedication to a particular job, therefore reducing your bandwidth, which means that your throughput will not change. It won't improve. Uh, this it's actually called the theory of constraints. If anybody is familiar with a book called The Goal, I don't know, Spencer, if you read it, I pulled it out so I could kind of show how
Yeah,
1980s this book is.
it's phenomenal. Yeah.
It's a great book, and it ultimately talks about how an organization's throughput is determined by its bottlenecks or constraints, right? It's based on the capacity of any team, which is limited by these constraints. So, in thinking about your sales performance throughput, and kind of why we're going to be talking about this today, is we we examined our entire sales performance and we kind of identified a couple bottlenecks that our team dealt with. I think it's pretty common. I think just about anybody on this call is going to agree when I mention things like, gosh, we were exploring too many options early on. We were taking too long to get decisions, taking too long to develop concepts and estimates, taking too long to get to the budget conversation, to get to a unified project vision, taking too long to sell a contract. Like when this seemed overwhelming to us at first, that's why I said this has been a 2 year process. But we also understood something I want to touch on today is our exercise in empathy mapping, because we also understood that you know expediting any of those things does not come without its own risk. When you think about what I mentioned earlier with theory of constraints, like pulling on one lever to open the throttle up, right? We're going to double our leads or we're going to increase our closing percentage. Uh, can ultimately increase friction somewhere else in your process. And then you have to deal with that, right? So, for example, if we were to try to sell bigger projects faster, uh, you know, our closing percentage may drop, right? Because clients weren't feeling like they were really getting the attention that they really wanted to, and they weren't getting handheld as much. So, to improve overall performance, the focus really should be on identifying, alleviating all of your bottlenecks, increasing the organization's capacity, all the way through, right? Um, the theory of constraints suggests that understanding and optimizing all of these particular pieces in your process, uh, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort. So I will pull this apart. Maybe let you interject here, Spencer, but ultimately, things that we did to eliminate bottlenecks in several areas of our sales process have allowed us to achieve what we feel like is like Cornerstone's true maximum efficiency. I mean, we've decreased our sales cycle down to 5.5 weeks. It used to be, gosh, over 20. We've decreased the amount of time that it takes us to get a proposal and design out the door. It used to be 26 days. Now it's 9. Just reran. I shouldn't have reran the report. It was 7. Now it's 9. Um, you know, Doing all these things have allowed a 3-person sales team. I have one project developer and 2 designers that are selling uh, up to $1.5 million a month. September was a record sales month for us. We sold $1.5 million worth of work, and just to see their success and doing this month over month over month, it's the same 3-person team that was selling at $3 million, and now they're selling. Their goal is to sell $800,000 a month, and to see them hit 1.5 million, and then the following month they hit 1 million. December they're going to hit probably $1.2 million. Uh, it's kind of like one of those realizations that you have as a business owner that you're like, okay, what I did worked. So I guess that's why I'm here talking with you to kind of
Yeah.
elaborate on a couple of things that we did.
Yeah, and I think hopefully that sounds exciting to people on here. And so I honestly would love for you to just jump into the weeds and kind of start stepping through kind of the how, right? Because that's always the first thing if somebody's like, cool, that sounds amazing. How do I also do that? Um, and maybe you can talk about how you've taken some of those pieces, like, hey, it took us this long just to get a proposal to somebody. Like, how did we shrink that part of it? And then I know there's been some kind of exciting, just like roll off outcomes that have come as a part of that as well, like around stickiness with the client and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I don't know who I recognize actually some names in the attendee list, but ultimately, depending on where you're at in your business too. I mean, this type of conversation, kind of where I'm at, is going to be speaking from I have a team of people helping me implement all of this stuff. So what I say may sound like, oh, we just kind of did it. I fortunately had a lot of help, but it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of tweaking, refining. I'm very agile. If you know the concept of Scrum, that's kind of how we operate as a business, both on render but side as well as Cornerstone. It takes a lot of effort. So, if you're at that $1-2 million stage, there may be some things that don't necessarily apply to kind of where you're at. But ultimately, hopefully, the theme of just operational efficiency and really paying attention to your process and how it's put together can actually help you get to that next stage and grow your company without a lot of the backbreaking hours that I had to put in, and probably a lot of people on this call had to put in early on. Like I had those 80-hour work weeks to kind of build to that next level before I was able to level out. Well, now I feel like, gosh, if I had this mindset early on, I might have been able to increase my capacity to get to that next stage and preserve that like bottom line revenue. So yeah, I can certainly share my screen and kind of talk through at least some of the things that we started to recognize early on. Um, let me do this. I'll just kind of keep this
Yeah. And as you're
uh,
pulling that up,
low detail.
if you do have questions, the chat is disabled, but the Q&A portion is working. Just use that. I'll be monitoring that and I'll try to pull those questions in and interrupt AJ along the way. AJ, you already have somebody saying, "Sell me. What are the advantages of render?" So, but yeah, the goal of this webinar is really to whether you're interested in render or not, you can take away some of these themes and the processes that AJ has put in place that you can just implement right into your business. And
Yeah.
as AJ said too, even if you're 1-2 million, you're still wearing a lot of the hats. Hopefully you can take like one or two of these big things, it can move you forward, and then you can get to some of the rest of it later. So yeah, go ahead, AJ.
So just a quick 10-second background. Cornerstone Remodeling is the name of my business. I'll refer to it as Cornerstone. It is a high touch, white glove remodeling, like boutique design remodeling company in the Baltimore, DC metro. So we have a couple things going for us, right? The geography located around where our company is like rock solid. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's a highly competitive market. Nevertheless, being real close to like the Baltimore, DC metro has its advantages. Um, so with that being said, like obviously we looked at how, one of our primary questions in this document that I'm sharing here, this is actually something that I built for my sales team and my design team. So this is like an internal Cornerstone slide deck when I was I was doing my corporate executive duty, like, oh, I'm gonna build like a slide deck so my team can follow along. I get made fun of for that a lot. So, you don't realize what is required out of you when you grow your business, and all of a sudden you're doing this stuff instead of swinging a hammer. Um, but nevertheless, I kind of built this, and I kind of asked the question, like, how do we deliver top shelf service in a fraction of the time? Like, that is a glaring question, right? So we started to poke holes, and so I identified these friction points. I mentioned them earlier, right? So we don't have to rehash them, but ultimately, I asked my team, I said, okay, where do you experience the most friction with, if I told you I wanted you to sell a job faster, like what holds you back? Things coming up like, okay, well, our clients want too many options. And this, if you're tracking data, like I can't tell people enough, like just know your numbers, right? How long does it take you to get an estimate out the door? Or how long does it take you from the time that you sign a design agreement to get an initial concept, like a first time, what we call a first pass, first time initial concept to a client? How long does that take? How can you reduce that time? So when we started to ask those questions, that's when we were starting to get these answers. Well, clients want to explore too many options. Problem. Every problem has a solution. Okay, how do we fix that, right? And we'll get into some of the solutions that we came up with because some of them were very obvious, but some of them were like, oh, you know what? Let's change our thinking about how we are supposed to do this. Extracting the real budget was always difficult because we would get one number from a client and all of a sudden design a project to that, and they're like, actually, no, we have twice that amount, or that's too expensive for us. We want to do half that amount. It's like, are you kidding me? So, speeding up the sales process definitely risks creativity. It's something that my employees shared with me. We also number six here, increasing the efficiency can, obviously employee satisfaction, keeping the culture in the company was really imperative for us. So all of these things we had to consider as we started to look at improving our entire sales process. So we uh we begun by mapping out, okay, what does a client journey look like? Let's put the shoe on the customer's foot. This exercise kind of led us into an exercise called empathy mapping. I spoke about this on a webinar with Kyle Hunt. I spoke about it a bit in Qualified Remodeler. If you guys subscribe to that magazine, you can actually find a little bit more detail about it there. I'll touch on it here too, but ultimately we wanted to experience, okay, what does the client go through to get into our door, right? And this begins all the way well before we get that consultation request form from our website. And so we started to like ask questions. Okay, what are they looking for? How do we meet them earlier on in the journey and support them and so forth. So we kind of mapped out this remodeling journey and then ultimately came to this conclusion. Here's all of our steps that we said, okay, we're going to go out and do these things. We started with empathy mapping. Like I said, this is an exercise that is best known with the marketing team. So Spencer, I'm sure you guys have done this exercise, and you can find help with ChatGPT if you need to kind of do this self-implemented. But ultimately, empathy mapping is just a way for you to identify what a customer hears, feels, thinks, does, and I'm forgetting says, thinks, does, and feels. Right. So we did this exercise, and it really was this was a compelling exercise for us. It helped us understand a little bit more about if we were to change a particular process in our company, we always weighed it. against what our customers were thinking, feeling, doing, or saying, right? So when customers felt like they couldn't trust a contractor, or they felt like they were going to get taken advantage of, or that they had preconceived notions about, what, like some anxieties about like not being contractors not being transparent. All of these things kind of came back up, right? When we were looking at selling jobs faster, then there were, some red flags. Like, oh, wait, customers don't like this piece of this, right? How can we alleviate that? So empathy mapping was a great exercise for us. And then, of course, identifying. So I talked about value engineering the sales process. Um, so, so once we did our empathy mapping exercise, we kind of said, okay, this is what our customers experienced through this full process. How do we apply this to what we're delivering them, right? So we did this value engineering exercise where we listed every piece of every service that we provide a particular client. We got granular with this. We must have had 100 things on a whiteboard. We were saying, okay, well, we give them an estimate. Well, we actually give them two. So we give them an initial estimate, then we give them a revised estimate. We give them a design. We give them a revised design. Then we give them 3D designs. So we listed all of these things out, and we said, okay, what is a client willing to pay for? And we started I put this all on a Google sheet and like an Excel spreadsheet. I just moved specific things up and down, like grabbed rows and moved them up and down. And we said, okay, well, if we want to get paid for design agreement, we felt that getting an initial payment up front was a good way to get a customer at least hooked enough to know that they were serious. They weren't just a tire kicker. But so that amount needed to be enough for us to weed out. People think all the time, like, oh, I'll charge $50 for a consultation. 50 bucks doesn't mean anything. If you're really going after customers that are worried about walking away from 50 bucks, those aren't those aren't your customer. Um, so we said, okay, well, what would a customer pay for to get an estimate? Because honestly, that's what took the most time for us. Customers don't want to pay for an estimate. A block of numbers means absolutely nothing to them. What they really wanted was a design. Well, that's intellectual property that's worth more. So, okay, well, if we included a design, maybe an initial concept, because when we were looking at our value engineering exercise, we saw that we were delivering space planning and concepts, and then we were also doing like higher fidelity designs, cabinet layouts, and 3D images of the space with tile selections and so forth. We said, well, what if we moved one of these things above the line? What if we did design concepts and an initial first pass estimate? How much would a client be willing to pay for that? So we tested the waters. We figured out that we had a really good combination of what clients would pay for. We're getting 1% of the target price. If we go out and look at a $300,000 project, they will pay us $3,000 to get an estimate, a low, what we call low fidelity. So it's placeholder numbers for allowances. It's basically a glorified budget, and a design concept, which is a floor plan and a couple of 3D images in like a wireframe type of model. So it's okay. We figured out what clients would be willing to pay for, and ultimately that helped the client trust us more because now we're being a little bit more transparent about what you're getting for this, right? If you have a $300,000 budget, let me put my best foot forward. I'll show you that I'm willing to walk the distance with you. Problem is, back to the theory of constraints, right? We figured out what clients wanted, but it took us a lot longer to do those things just to get like a yes or a no. So now I've got to put a design forward for like 1%. I'm not looking to sell design agreements, I'm looking to sell construction contracts. So, okay, we just presented ourselves in our next problem. Not even getting into the whole idea of eliminating the whole like you know multiple options things, which I'll talk about next. But just if it takes us this long to collect measurements, and I'll show you like when we started implementing this. So this, if you don't flow chart your processes, you need to start. I will tell you that. Whiteboards are the best. Surround yourself with whiteboards. I am not ashamed to admit that on every wall that you do not see on this camera, there is a whiteboard. There's a whiteboard here, two massive ones there, and one over here. So we started to map out our sales process, and you can kind of see we went through several iterations here. And we started to ask questions. Okay, so when we got to, we're going to sell this design agreement, and then now we need to go out and visit and measure the home. We need to create the as-built, do the design concepts, and of course, the first pass proposal. We started to poke holes and say, okay, where are we now? Where are we spending our time? So we started looking. Let me go back here. We started to realize where our bottlenecks were. Is there were too many options to explore up front, and then measuring up front took too long. And when I say that, it meant that we weren't measuring on the initial consultation because we didn't have any money in our hand. And I'm not going to tell my salespeople to spend an hour inside of a home taking measurements. So uh, those two things added into our sales cycle. Our sales cycle started to get a little longer now that we were waiting for uh, confirmations. We get the design agreement, then we have to schedule to go back out to the home, measure, create the as-built with my architectural designer, and so forth. So we then started to ask questions. Okay, well, how do we fix that? And of course, now render was a huge part of this because as at the time that we were figuring out, okay, how do we take measurements earlier and how can that help us get the design started faster? Well, of course, I'm designing render for a remote engagement tool, and now I can be like, okay, well, hold on, I can actually use render for that. So we then started to say, let me go back to the options here. And Spencer, feel free to stop me if I'm talking too fast or too much. I
Yeah,
get really excited about this stuff.
you're good. I think, I mean, the highlighting number two, I think, just for a second, like that's the big one, right? Like trying to figure out what are people willing to pay for and how quickly can you get to that point in the sales process. And so, yeah, if you're tracking along, at least these are the things that I'm pulling out. And then now we're moving to, okay, cool. If this is what people are willing to pay for, but oh my gosh, that stuff takes a whole lot of time and effort, how do we condense that? Because then we start to experience the scale part of it. Otherwise, you just end up with like, cool, we're offering something that people are willing to pay for, but it's not really profitable for us, or we can't charge enough to make it profitable because people like you hit
Right.
a ceiling on somebody's not going to pay 10, 15, 20 grand for that first step, but they'll pay 1% or whatever it is. So, yeah, no, I would say keep moving. And I'm assuming people are probably interested to hear like,
Yeah.
okay, and so how do you condense that? Because it's really just like figuring out like what is your initial offer, this
Yeah.
price, this
So
thing, and get them in the door.
assuming that the number two can be handled like internally, like figure out what you need to charge to hook a client and what you need to deliver with that, right? So we did that. We found out that it was a first pass, what we call a first pass proposal, which includes a couple of 3D images and a proposal for the space that's a little bit more hashed out. So once we did that, we then identified our friction. When I talk about multiple, too many options being explored up front, like I can't be on the hook for designing, three or six or 10 different options for a client. It's a huge pain point for a lot of design builds. I mean, I can't see anybody. I imagine there's a couple of heads nodding. We just got a question. The first pass proposal, yes, these are including allowances for all of the selection materials. We have built out, I'm jumping ahead here, but we've built out so many templates in our project management software where creating these estimates is actually pretty easy. And these allowances are great placeholder numbers to prove to a client that yes, what you see here in this design can be constructed within reason of this budget, plus or minus. We usually say plus or minus 10%, as long as you're sticking with these allowances. And we go in very strong. We say the allowances are very healthy. You can actually save a lot of money, and so forth. But kind of leading it up to that, we realized that a couple of pieces were needed for us to make that process smooth. So identifying the friction, right? Um, Options were too there were too many options. Getting the budget up front was hard, and then of course, solidifying that budget for the client took a lot of effort. Like they need to trust me when I say this project's going to cost them $200,000. So we did a couple of things. We did three things to be exact. The Moscow report. So I'll get into that what that is. We did a journey book, and then uh, let me start with those two. Moscow report. It's an acronym. Stands for must have, should have, could have, and will not have. It's a great mechanism for prioritizing lists, especially when you're going into a project, right? So we actually send a customized Moscow report Google form to a client when they submit um, an inquiry on our website, right? So when that email goes out to the client, we say, hey, in preparation for that first discovery call, we have a Zoom meeting with them. We are going to give you a little bit of homework. Here are things that we're going to discuss on this call, right? This is part of Sandler type of selling. We're going to give you a little bit of homework, and here's what to expect. And one of the things that we're going to talk a lot about is this Moscow report. Get a head start. We want you to list all of the things in this project in this particular prioritization order: must have, should have, could have, and will not have, right? Must haves. If you're going to spend any bit of money on this project, what must it have? Well, we definitely need to take the dining room wall out. The kitchen has to get bigger. Okay, must have. We want, and we'll pick up keywords like this, right? We want inset cabinets. Okay, that's a should have or could have, might affect the budget. And depending on where your budget is, we might leave that thing out. So ultimately, we're getting the client to give us a priority list of things that are on, their mind about this project that otherwise is just mental vomit that comes to them on this initial consultation. Our designers are just writing all the notes down, saying they want all these things. It's like, yeah, but they can't afford all these things. So ultimately, what we do is we use this Moscow report and we use it right back with a client, right? So clients will fill this out sometimes, right? A lot of times on the discovery call, the designers are actually filling this out based on what they're hearing from the client. So we have this Moscow report, and right away, all right, we have a really good idea what this project is supposed to look like based on this Moscow report, Spencer, that you filled out. This project's somewhere between 200 and $400,000, right? Because I know based on this Moscow report, your project's probably 2 to 250, but I'm going to say 2 to 400 to gauge the client's reaction. They come back and say, well, I didn't want to spend that much money. Well, how much did you want to spend? How much, like, based on this Moscow report, if we focused on all of your must-haves and perhaps, most of your should-haves, we could probably figure something out between the 150 and 250 range. Would that feel more comfortable for you? And usually the answer is like, yeah, I don't really want to go above 200. Great. 200 is an awesome budget. We know that they would likely go more than 200 because they're not going to share that with us, but we don't need to know that yet. All we needed was permission to explore a project up to 200 based on their priority list. So you're telling me that if I want to explore this priority list, I'll knock out as much as I can up to $200,000. Then I have not only fine-tuned exactly what I need to explore for this first pass proposal, but now I'm not exploring all these other things. You said you wanted to do your foyer, your family room. You said you wanted to paint the garage floor and update the kids' bathroom. Well, now that I have $200,000 to play with, I'm going to focus on the things that are must have and should have, and maybe if I have enough room, pull up some of your could haves.
Quick,
Awesome technique. Yeah, awesome
yeah,
technique for that.
quick interruption. We got a few questions. I think we can rapid fire them and then keep rolling. Somebody asked if you're willing to share the Moscow report, and then related to that, they also want to know, is the Moscow report discovery call all before the first in-home meeting? And then Jack
Yes.
also wanted to know what project management software you guys are using.
We use JobTread. We switched from CoConstruct to JobTread earlier this year. And yes, I'm happy to share the Moscow report. And actually, if you just Google or ChatGPT, what is a Moscow report? Plenty of information online. I'll share what we did. It's really simple, but I'll make it available. And yes, the Moscow report goes into the customer's hands prior to the discovery call, prior to the Zoom meeting. We bring it up during the Zoom meeting and we fill most of it out, as much of it out as we can. And then ultimately, we do often schedule an in-home consultation. Like we want to go out to the client's home, we do want to look them in the eye, shake their hand, make a really good connection, right? Because we're human beings. We like to think that we're really fun. So that kind of like seals the deal with a lot of our clients. And then we'll bring the Moscow report back up there as well so that we can make sure, like, hey, look, we're going to build a design agreement off of this Moscow report. So this is really imperative for us to flesh out. So all those things get kind of hammered out in those first couple of interactions with our clients. One thing to note, any customer, any potential lead can book their own discovery call through Calendly on our website. One of the biggest changes, improvements we made to our whole, MQL to SQL conversion was allowing them to schedule their own appointments. We're now no longer tracking them down to try to get them on an appointment. We can actually just go in and see who booked an appointment over the weekend and say, oh, well, these people are out of our area. We're going to go ahead and cancel this appointment. So now we're not picking up the phone trying to find out where these people are. Huge friction reducer if you can allow your clients to actually book their own discovery calls. So we talked about the Moscow report, and the number two asset that we created was what we call a journey book. Unfortunately, I don't have it pulled up to share, but I can show you guys what this looks like. The journey book is really just what we did is we said, okay, well, we need something, some sort of collateral to show our customers during that initial consultation and on this discovery call. So we created what we call a journey book. This is just a collection of, I think it's 30, maybe 30 different projects we've done over the past year, 2 years. And we wanted to highlight specific projects in each category. So, right, we have a couple of bathrooms, we have a handful of kitchens, first floor renos, and a couple additions. And in each of those, we kind of walk a client through the specific customer's journey in that particular project. So we said, okay, this particular client came to us with these were their top priorities on that Moscow report. We came to them with this budget, we designed this is what they ended up with. So there's like this walkthrough of like, okay, here's what it looked like before, here's what the design concepts were, this was their budget for the project, this was their comfort zone. So we call it comfort zone instead of a budget because it sounds nicer.
Sounds better,
But we
yeah.
also we also show it in like in a speedometer, right? So we say, okay, we don't want the low end and we don't want the high end number from you, we just want to focus on what's comfortable. And we kind of set those parameters with that Moscow report, and we show them this client's comfort zone budget was 150 to 200, and they ended up spending 175. Right? So we use this little arrow to show this particular client ended up here. And all throughout this journey book, that needle moves. Some clients saved a lot of money, some clients went well over their budget, and we are transparent sharing all of that data. Like, hey, this particular client wanted to spend 2 to 300, end up spending $600,000 with us. But here's why, right? They saw what they could do. We ended up blowing this thing up and do because we'll do that with you, right? So the journey book is a really good way for us to kind of explain to the client why the Moscow report's important and why the comfort zone budget is important too. Because look at all these other success stories that we can share with you. These people gave us this intel, and because of it, look at their space now. It's like on a magazine cover. So every client that comes to a design build company like ours really wants to experience that success story. I mean, every customer, it's the story brand, right? Every customer wants to be that hero of their own story, and we're simply guides. We're simply here to help them achieve that vision. So when we can show them, hey, we helped all these other people achieve this vision, we just need these things from you, then they're willing to hand those things over. So the journey book was really incredible for us to kind of make a part of our sales process as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. There's a couple of questions in here around if you're charging for site visits and then kind of conversion rates through the funnel. I think people are
Yeah,
wondering, if you've seen any changes to that and kind of expectations around that.
yeah. So out of all of the let's see, out of all the leads that come as qualified leads, a lot of times these are either disqualified prior to that Zoom call, geography or budget was not right, or the type of project, right? We won't even do the discovery call for those. And out of the discovery calls that we get to, unless something glaring comes up, we will almost always either send them a design agreement from the discovery call or say that we'll go out. If it's a smaller project, generally with like under $100,000, we'll actually just send a design agreement their way. If it's over that, or if it's more of a complex project or something that we really want to get, right, we're going to go out to the home, and we do not charge for that initial site visit. And the reason why is because we keep that site visit to less than 30 minutes. We're not out there for 3 hours, right? I'm not out there to measure. Well, I wasn't out there to measure. Now we are. Um, we try to keep those things really, try to preserve my team's time and bandwidth for projects that are actually moving forward, that are paid projects, right, under contract. So we sell 44% of all of our leads end up signing a design agreement with my team, right? For that first pass proposal. Now we do two different agreements. We do one for that first pass, and then we do one which is a full design retainer. So of the leads that come in the door, 44% of them end up signing this design agreement to get that first pass proposal. Pretty standard closing percentage. I think the industry average is between 25 and 50. So 44% get that far, and then 76% of everyone who signs a design agreement is signing the full retainer. And when they sign that full retainer, it's 100% closing rate. So we basically at that point deem the job booked. So we'll actually begin prepping development on the backside for production once the job reaches that full design retainer. So here's the kicker, right? Those closing percentages, I think they're not going to be like mind blowing for most, formidable design build companies on this call. But here's what's mind blowing. I have 6 to 10 hours of time invested in every single project that before they get to that 100% mark, right? 6 to 10 hours on average for a client to go from, hey, we heard about you on Facebook. Here's my information. Can you set up a discovery call to I'm signing a full design retainer, 6 to 10 hours of my team's time invested in that project. That used to be well over 30 because
Mhm.
what we were doing is we were spending an hour up front, then another hour on an in-home visit, then putting together a design agreement, then going back out to the home, sending my architectural designer out there to go take measurements, which would take an hour, 2 hours. We were manually entering that information. Then we were building a design, then building an estimate, all to get a client to say no, right? Because ultimately that's what we're trying to get, right? We're trying to get to the no as fast as we can because any bit of time that we spend on a client that says yes is within reason, right? It is worth it. But it's the clients that say no that we look at how much time we just spent to get to a no. And
Yeah.
that's bothersome. When you're spending 20, 30 hours of your team's time on no and no and no, that adds up. It's not scalable. So what we were out to say, out to prove is like, can we get to the no as fast as we can? Can we spend as little amount of time to get to that no as much as we can? So ultimately, we've been able to reduce jobs in our pipeline. We found out that they would rattle around for 16 weeks, right? And when I say rattle around, these are jobs that don't end up moving forward with my business. They would rattle around in my sales pipeline for 16 weeks because it was discovery call, and then it was design agreement, and then it was follow-ups, and then it was like revisions and all this stuff. 16 weeks. We've gotten that down to 4. So now, if a job doesn't end up moving forward with our business after 4 weeks, it's no longer being entertained. So now, what we've been able to do is say, look at our pipeline and say, okay, we're cycling through our pipeline 4 times faster. Back to the theory of constraints, right? Can I reduce the amount of time that it takes me to sell a project? Can I increase the amount of leads? Can I increase my closing percentage or at least maintain it, right? Because if I do those things and maintain my closing percentage, my throughput's still higher. Like all of those things were contributing to our success over the last, gosh, I would say we kind of probably perfected this in 2024, the latter half. Um, I know I just said a lot of words there, but I'm kind of
Yeah.
like pausing to catch my breath here. Is there any? I haven't been
Yeah.
monitoring the chat or anything. I know you
No,
are.
yeah, there's a handful, and we might be able to just hit a couple rapid fire, and then yeah, we got about 15 minutes left. So
Ah,
then if you want
I
to
just
move
saw.
to yeah.
Yeah, I just saw one because I keep alluding to this, and Holly, thanks for this. How do you give them a design concept without measuring? So back to this guy. Let me show you this. So when we we used to go have this interview, and then we would visit the project, and then we would sign the design agreement, and then we would go back out to the home, and that's when we would actually measure. So we asked ourselves, okay, how can we eliminate going back out to the home to measure if we didn't want to spend an hour or two measure hours measuring on that initial consultation? So what we do is, this is where the workflow enhancements come from with Render. It's 'cause now our designers, who aren't trained to like do like a full-on site measure, right? They're not my architectural designer, but we equip them with Render. Now they can, on a home visit, they can actually go through and they can scan the space with Render. It'll it'll digitally create an entire floor plan of whatever they scan. So, right, you can actually do an entire first floor of a home in 2 or 3 minutes. It lays the entire thing out for you, like instantly on your phone or on your iPad. We equip them all with iPads, and from there, it captured all the measurements of every wall. It locates all your windows, your doors. Gosh, it shows you cabinets, sinks, faucets, toilets, tubs, stairs, like all of it. And it's all there on your device. We show elevations, so we're mapping out how high windows are up off the ground and how close they are to the adjacent doorway. Because things that are really important for me to lay out a space is, okay, where exactly is this kitchen window? Can I fit that 20, can I make that trash can cabinet 21 inches to the left of the sink? Or am I going to have to move it to the right side, right? Those things were really important for me to have kind of laid out. Or can I fit this island in a kitchen when I really only have 12 feet from the back wall to the middle wall? So when we started to scan with Render, what was happening is, because we were only spending 2 or 3 minutes, we could actually just put the iPad away or the phone away. We'll grab a couple of key measurements, like alcoves in the kitchen or kitchen sink, but ultimately that's it. So I now have the entire layout of the space in 3 minutes. It's put away. We're having a conversation, making a really great connection with the client, and then we send them a design agreement. When they sign it, we now no longer have to go back out to the home to take measurements, right? Because that was, okay, we're going to email them, call them, schedule the time. They got to take off of work or meet them, whenever. That would take about a week. And then it would go into my architect's queue. My architect would go out there, measure the space on graph paper, and then come back and put it into chief architect. So another 2 days. So we're talking about a week and a half before my designers could actually get started on the design. Well, now we have the render scan. We have two integrations live, one with chief architect, one with 2020. We can actually just drag and drop that file and create the layout, the walls, windows, and doors instantly, like immediately inside Chief Architect. So my designers now, when the design agreement drops, we see it pop up a DocuSign. They can start on it literally within seconds. So that was key for us. That was a huge time saver. When I talk about shrinking that overall sales cycle, Render was it for us. So this is what we call our power stack. I think, Spencer, you must have called on that last time we spoke because I saw that in the email. We'll talk
Yeah.
about his power stack. So we call this our tech power stack. We use Zoom because it's remote. We use Render because it's quick and easy. Render, we have creator as built for us, whether it's in Chief Arc or 2020. We use Chief Arc primarily, unless it's like real heavy kitchen stuff where we know we're just gonna have to order our cabinets through it. So we use Chief Architect. It's a powerful solution, but we can generate those designs really quickly with a lot of their great tools. We use JobTread, like I said. We have tons of templates built out so that we can estimate jobs really quickly. It's funny, we did this exercise. I can't remember the name of it, but we found out through this exercise, it was like this culture index is what it's called. Note that culture index, look it up. It's pretty incredible exercise, but we found out through doing that there was a secret power player in my office. Lori, she was our production coordinator. She had everything that we needed in an estimator. We had no idea. It's like it was just Laura had never estimated a construction project, but I'll tell you what, you build out templates and you find somebody who has the aptitude for it. She's spitting out estimates left and right almost instantly. It's incredible. And then, of course, we build these. Oh, one thing I know we're probably going to be running short on time here, but at the last bit of this was when I go back and talk about empathy mapping, right? So, and value engineering, we needed our clients to not feel like they were a cog in a machine, right? we're talking about increasing efficiency, getting these things out fast. What are our clients going to feel if they feel like they were just a ticket on like our thing and we're just pushing them through? So I asked my team, I said, "Oh, hey, look, we can't just put together an estimate and put together a design and just email these files to them. Like feels like, yeah, they just paid all this money and all they got were two PDFs. Yay. Um, I said, how do we make this feel and look like $1 million? Like they just spent $3,000 to get a couple of images and an estimate. How do we make them feel like they got so much more out of this than, just a simple estimate? Well, we kind of looked at how do we increase our visuals here and our presentation. So we actually started using Canva. We have been using Canva for a lot of marketing stuff. It actually helps me build uh, ad content and so forth for social media and stuff. So we said, okay, well, hey, let's use Canva, build a proposal. What could it look like? And I'll tell you what, you build a template in Canva, and I'll show you couple things we did. So this is the mock-up of our first pass proposals. This is what they look like. So when we send an estimate and a design out to a client, it's coming in one pretty packaged up PDF. We built this out with a couple of keynotes here. This background image, the reason why I love Canvas so much is that we can customize the crap out of this. Right? We can drop in a different photo in the background. You see it instantly changes it. We can throw their custom design as the background if we wanted to. We can put a picture of their house in there, like a street, a Google view, whatever we want. One big thing here is that both millennials crave this, but also most clients in the design build segment, they want to feel that interconnected, like it's a lot about relationships, right? So each designer has their own avatar that has their own template. So when we send this proposal, instead of sending a blurb in an email, feels like a little handoff, we put the blurb here in this proposal and we put the avatar of the designer that they met on that discovery call or in person, right? So we're kind of keeping that emotional connection alive in a document. Scroll down and we'll just clip, if anybody uses chief architect on this call, creating a layout is sometimes painful. It takes forever to accumulate all these images and floor plans. We're not doing that. We literally clip, like screen capture a clip. We paste it right here in the document. We'll include, like I said, a wireframe 3D model.
AJ, real
Uh,
quick before you keep
yeah,
scrolling, just a couple of questions in housekeeping. We just got a question. I don't know your availability to like bump this another 15 minutes, but somebody's like, "Hey, can we keep this going if people are interested?" So, not to put you on the spot, but if you have a little more time, we can keep going.
sure.
And then a couple questions around which chief architect package, and then does render integrate with Chief Arc was one of the other questions.
Yeah, I use Chief Arc X16, but it really render is using their DXF import with pad to walls. So it's not a direct integration with Chief Arc yet because it's going to be in the new year. Where you can actually open up a render file directly into Chief Arc. I saw that question come through. So that is coming. It's going to be an upgrade. But right now, yes, the DXF file imports right into Chief. You use the Chief Architect CAD to walls, and it builds your entire plan out for you. Um, Happy to steer you into like kind of seeing. We have some clickable demos on our website about how that actually works, which can get you probably a lot more information. Or after this meeting, hit me up. I'm available I'm findable through LinkedIn, email, all that stuff. And Spencer, I'm sure if you send out a follow up to this, just if you want to include my contact information, happy to kind of steer people in the right directions.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, we'll drop the recording to everyone, and then
Yeah.
I'll drop your info as well.
And Render is similar to Canvas, but very different. So we have two different products, right? So Canvas is an awesome product. We actually used it for years. Canvas, you scan with LiDAR, just like with Render. But Canvas, what they do is they actually generate an entire fully fleshed out 3D model in your desired CAD software. Uh, when I was using Canvas, I was more or less frustrated with how much I was having to kind of like take out of it, right? So it was like I don't need electrical outlets. I don't need specific things, right? I was ended up deleting too many things, and of course I'm OCD with my layer sets. When I build out permittable plans for my for the local county or whatever jurisdiction. I'm kind of a nut with layers. So ultimately, Canvas was a little bit too cumbersome, and we were almost spending them as much as like a actual person's salary for what we were spending on Canvas. So when we did render, I focused on the things that I knew that I needed most to actually get started on my designs faster. So render scans again with LiDAR, just like Canvas, but ultimately we're making that data instantly available to you on your device and then instantly available inside of your CAD software. And right there with 2020 Chief Arc, if I have my walls, windows, and doors, I'm now off to the races and I can start designing with all of my defaults. All of the defaults are preserved through what we do. So it was a huge change from kind of what Canvas does. If you're a company that needs that fully fleshed out like as built from Canvas, like we're not we're not in the market to do that. And we actually told that to Canvas. We're like, hey, look, you guys have an awesome product. We have our awesome product. We're not even competing for the same thing. But yeah, so back to the first pass proposal, like we dropped the estimate in, and kind of you see we have a couple blank pages. That's where the estimate would live. And then this is clutch. We clients felt very apprehensive about kind of what was to come. They didn't really know what to expect. So setting expectations and kind of like informing them every step of the way. It's intuitive for us to understand this, but ultimately we did a visual for them. We wanted them to know exactly what the process looked like for them. So this goes out in the design agreement. It's actually one of the first pages in the design agreement where they're here, right? This is what's next. Is you're going to get a first pass proposal. Now you can see that, okay, next step is design and selections. So think about it this way. We we're generating a ton of value for our clients and we're hand-holding them through this whole process, right? But what we didn't realize would be such a huge asset for us in a highly competitive market was the perceived value that we were generating with this first pass proposal and what we were doing with how fast we were turning things around. So in a client's mind, when they're seeing this timeline, they're halfway through. We know as we know this design selection phase is going to take a long time, right? It's 4, 6, 8 weeks. But ultimately, for the client to understand, like, hey, I've already done 2 steps. Now I'm on my third out of 5. I'm already halfway done with this company. I'm already halfway there in 7 days. So they're getting
Yeah,
this in
that's
7 days,
incredible.
right? So when you think about when a client talks to a design build company, and we experienced this, and we were one of these companies, and now we're experiencing it from the other side, is that in 7 days, the client has met us, we've been to their home, they've signed a design agreement, and we have generated for them a completely tailored project with an estimate all within 1 week while they are still waiting to schedule a time to have somebody else come out to their home, or they're still waiting to get a proposal from the other contractor who said he'd have it to them last week and it's still not there. So many clients are choosing to further their discussions with us because they get bored waiting for my competitors to show up. So it's incredible that, not only are we producing a lot of value for the clients and understanding exactly what they were looking for in this process, but now we're getting them to doubt the ability of our competitors to keep up. Because, hey, look, if we were able to give them what they wanted in 7 days and it takes somebody else 21 days to give it to them, well, what does that say about their ability to actually produce this project? So, right, so it's starting to sow the seeds of doubt. Now, I compete against some really good companies, right? So these companies are out there, their quality is 100%, and the way they treat their customers are 100%, right? Just like us. And I meet with these companies, but I'll tell you what, when it comes to a client's perception between us and them, like I'll take any advantage that my company can get, right? So if it means delivering the same amount of value that that other company will deliver, only I'm doing mine faster, well, newsflash, over the next 6 to 7 years, we're going to start to see the millennial tide, right? We're going to start to see that shift. Millennials are expecting things faster and more conveniently. So I've just positioned my business to sell remodeling projects faster and more conveniently. And because of that, I feel like over the next 6 or 7 years, we're going to hit our stride with already being prepped and delivering these things in a manner that millennials expect them to be faster and more convenient. So anyway, last thing I'll leave you with on this first pass proposal is that one great thing about Canva is we wanted the clients to feel like we were really like focused on like the design element side. So we kind of built this, what we call a little mood board, a little design inspiration board. When a client says, like, blue islands or white hoods or whatever, our designers pick up on it. And although we're not showing that up here, right? We're not showing that yet here because that takes a lot of time to kind of build out in Chief Architect. What we will do is we'll drop some photos in. So we have these placeholders, right? We can drag and drop these photos in, and then these paint colors actually tie to those photos. So if we wanted to pull that island color out, boom, took me what, 3 seconds? So now I can completely curate like this whole design heavy proposal, and it takes my designers maybe 20 minutes to put this together. So when you get this as a client within 7 days, it looks like you were our only client for the last week. Like we had nothing else going on other than to spend all of this ridiculous amount of time building out your project. And like I said, we are able to get this first pass proposal out in less than 10 hours of our own team's dedicated time on that individual project. And by the time they get this first pass proposal, the next step is for them to actually sign that full design retainer, which is 4% of the job. So again, that $300,000 example, ultimately they're going to pay us 3,000 up front, and then they're going to pay us, $12,000 for that full design retainer. Essentially 5% of the overall project they're paying up front, and we're able to do that and get that far with 6 to 10 hours on average of time invested in that project. So just a testament to a lot of the hard work that my team's put in over the last 2 years on developing this. Again, the empathy mapping was a really good almost litmus test for us on all these initiatives. Like, what are our clients feeling if we were to change this? Value engineering the process. The journey book and the Moscow report have been incredible for us to use on our team. Going back to this, using render, now we can collect measurements on that initial site visit without spending any additional time. So now we're still able to do that in 30 minutes, but now we just saved a week and a half on the back end, and we just saved a couple hours of design time. We hear all the time. I'm doing these fun case studies with a lot of the people that use render, some big companies, and hearing from one of them, it's a $30 million company out of St. Louis, and they shifted from Canvas over to Render, and I was like, hey, what's the biggest impact that you've noticed? And they're like, well, when when we decided to use software for this, it ended up adding a week to our sales cycle. But ever since we found Render, not only did it save us that week, but it's actually saving us an additional week. So they're cutting 2 weeks off their sales process, and they said that they're able to save over 2 hours for every design that they put together. And I'm like, so it's not just us, you know? And of course, JobTread has been great. Gosh, their API talks to literally any software out there. So integrated software is the key to success when you're building your own, tech stack and figuring out what you want. What kind of software really works well for your business. And then, of course, Canva and Chief Architect, the two other softwares here. We are in love, in heaven with this process. But I'll tell you what, you talk to me from a year from now, and you can kind of see we went around the block a couple times, with our sales process, went through several iterations. So as you kind of perfect things in your own process, just know, like, I have a three-step process, right? It's scrutinize, simplify, streamline. So I'm always scrutinizing our processes. So, like I said, you talk to me from a year from now, and there's likely something that's going to be different, and it's going to be like, oh no, this is genius. Yeah, we threw away last year's plan, and now we're doing this. But
Yeah.
hopefully my team's not listening to this because they would hate me if I ever said that.
They're like, oh, great, this is going to be
Yeah,
four
great,
steps
more
next year.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like the other advantage that you and I have talked about in other conversations is just not only is it faster, like the faster thing is huge because speed usually wins and speed does equate to value, like real value. But the stickiness factor, right, is like somebody is willing to stick with you through the process because you've delivered value so much quicker and faster. So yeah, I feel like that is is worth mentioning as well. I know we're 2 minutes past the hour. If you have a few more minutes, I can run through a whole bunch of these questions. If people have more questions to dive in, I feel like we can knock out a bunch of these in
Yeah.
maybe 6 or 7 more minutes. So it was 1% for the first pass, 4% for the full retainer, and then Heather asks, is there a construction agreement with deposit after that?
Ultimately, that's what we're shooting for. So we're not selling design agreements as a way of business. So yes, we sell 1% first pass, 4% full retainer. So total of 5%. These are not refunded to the client. This is to pay for everything that they're getting through the design process. And yes, the build contract is then presented. We have a fun name for that. And when that's signed, we actually get a 30% deposit on that work so that we can begin procuring a lot of those the special orders, cabinets, countertops, things like that.
Perfect. Okay. There's a couple questions around tech. So if you can answer them quickly, great. Otherwise, maybe there's some resources. One was on Matterport. How does that compare to Canvas and Render? The other one, I saw it a couple times, which is how does Render compare to Polycam?
Matterport's a little bit different technology. Matterport and Canvas are probably more similar. The differences between Matterport and Render are, I think you would notice the amount of time it takes you to actually scan a space. Matterport's building these what they call photogrammetry models. A lot of real estate companies use them for virtual walkthroughs. Render is really focused on, and there's a pricing difference between those two and us as well. We're more of a subscription. Use it as much as you want. We're not going to charge you per project or per square foot, which is what Matterport does, and Camps, I believe, as well. So we wanted to make sure that all these things are we're providing these floor plans instantly on device. We're allowing you to get them into your design software. We're integrating with Build Exact in January. We have a job tread integration, a really light one that's already live. There's a really fun integration with JobTrick coming in the new year with parameters, estimate data. I think that's really what's going to set us apart more from Polycam. To answer that quickly, Polycam is using LiDAR as well. There's a couple of them using similar technology that we are. We're using basically every piece of hardware in an iOS device. From the LiDAR sensor to the gyroscope, time of flight sensor, all of it. And Polycam is doing something similar, but ultimately we're doing it with our construction knowledge, right? So we're providing those elevations to you. The direct integrations are really what we're shooting for. So the direct integration with Chief Architect is going to be a big deal. I think our CAD to walls export from Render is probably the biggest difference between Polycam and Render, because we actually prep that DXF file. When you get it into Chief Architect, you can literally just use your CAD to walls and say, hey, can you transform this into a model, right? With Polycam DXF, you'd have to trace over it with your walls and windows, snap them all into place. We said, well, hey, Chief Architect actually reached out to us and they said, we love the fact that you're using the CAD to walls tool. Nobody uses that. And we're like, I've used it. I've used Chief Architect for 15 years and I've used it every time I got a drawing from an architect. So fortunately, I knew about the tool. We kind of tweaked our DXF file to kind of be compatible with it. So I think that's the biggest differentiator there.
Cool. I'll probably hit a couple more, but I'm gonna sneak one in of my own. For people that went through this whole thing, maybe they're doing a couple of these things, maybe they're doing none of these things that they've seen and some of the ideas you've talked about. How would you approach starting this process? Because it probably can be like, whoa, there's like the journey book, there's the Moscow report, there's the layering in 5 different pieces of technology. Maybe they're using one or two. Like, where would you begin to take a really big step forward?
Mapping out your process. Think about every step, and there are plenty of books to help with this. Pinnacle is one of them. Do I have it? I do not have it over here. There's a book called Systemology. There's a bunch of books out there, and hit me up. I have a book list of all the books that I've read. A lot of things to help you map out a process, but typically what you're looking for are steps. You're not looking for tasks, you're looking for steps. Step one is client, we have a client meeting. Tasks in that client meeting are part of that step, but ultimately you want to map out the process and steps. I say to keep those processes within 12 steps. You don't want to make this. I've seen process maps that are like 40 steps long. It's like, no, 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 those are all different processes in a system. So ultimately, just map these things out. I think when you can visualize your process, you can really start to understand, okay, I have a problem. I can go back and share some of my old ones. It will look like a spaghetti map. So ultimately, you want to then simplify it, right? So scrutinize it, simplify it. Okay, how can I make this 14, 20 step process down to like 12 or 10 or 9 or 8? And then you can start to say, okay, how can I get this more in a linear fashion? So I can't pass go unless I get here. And then at that point, once you start mapping these things out, the friction becomes very apparent because if you can't simplify a couple of steps, you start to understand like that you need to start asking why. Why can't I simplify this? Okay, what's holding us back? One of the questions I got, here was from Holly, if you're still here, do you trust the program to give you accurate measurements and do not need to go back out to confirm measurements? So this was one of our things that we said, okay, why can't we shrink the amount of time here? Is because we were worried about those 1/8 measurements. Render is going to get you measurements to within an inch in most cases. Some really large scans, you might notice some 3 to 4 inches. Those things used to matter a ton for us up front. They don't matter at all anymore. We started to realize, okay, well, if we get to that 100% retainer, we're usually scheduling a site visit anyway because we want to cut holes at this point. We want to, figure out, okay, we're guessing that there's a toilet line in this bulkhead. Now we're going to make sure. At that point, that's when we're going back out to confirm measurements. So yeah, at that point, it's worth us to then go back through and double check some measurements. But I know the render's accurate enough for me to get through that initial concept and those proposals to get to that point where I get that 100% closing rate. That point, yes, I will go out and measure it. Another kicker there is I'm now no longer measuring the entire house. All the other measurements within an inch are great for flooring, paint, all that. Now my architect will go out and he'll just capture all the critical measurements, right? So we want to double check spans and get the measurements throughout the kitchen space, but ultimately, like we already have the rest of the plan built. We don't need to double check all those. It's a great tool to get further along. We were always measuring twice anyway. That second measure now is only when we know the job's moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. AJ, I'm gonna cut him off here. You've been super
Sure.
generous with your time. I appreciate it. I know there are a few other like tech questions. I'm just gonna make sure that your contact info is in the follow-up. But if anyone does want to learn more about Render, what's the best place to go? Or should I just send them right to your email?
Feel free to send me my email. Like if you want to include my contact information, I love talking process, stuff. So if there's stuff outside of the render realm that I can be helpful for, I'd love to see contractors succeed. You know it. We work so hard to try to make our businesses thrive, and then next thing you know, somebody throws a wrench at our face, and all of a sudden, we have other problems, somebody quits or whatever. So it's hard to see contractors spend as many hours as required to grow their business. So if any of this can be helpful, I feel like we spent 2 years kind of building something and it's like, oh crap, this thing actually works. So love to share. I'll be at Job Trek Connect. I know you will be as well in January. So it'll be nice to catch up there. Look for me there. Render will have a booth. Happy to give you more demos. You can find us online, render.com. It's RENDR .com. And of course, yeah, if you send out my contact information, happy to steer people if they want a sales demo. I can steer them in that direction. If they just want to learn more about Cornerstone process, happy to divulge.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. And I'm pretty confident that everyone at least walked out of here with one or two things that they can take and improve their process. But yeah, what you guys have done is super cool. And for everyone listening, I'll send out all the follow-ups and the contact info. I know some people ask for like resources. I'll check with AJ to see like what he's willing to throw that out there into the world and maybe what he wants to keep, and we'll honor that. But I'll circle up with you after the fact for those things.
Yeah, and I also have a list of all the questions here too. So any of that are kind of fun to answer. Maybe when you send out that information, I'll kind of get to a couple of these just in the email and send them out. There's a couple of good ones in here. Yeah. Thanks, dude. I appreciate, being on the
Cool.
call. And hopefully people got, enough out of this. And yeah, looking forward
Yeah,
to
I'm sure they
connecting in
did.
January.
Yeah, for sure. And Merry Christmas, everybody. And we'll see you in the new year if you're at the Job Tread conference coming up here. Thanks again, AJ.
Big time, man. Hey, thanks again. Merry
Yeah.
Christmas, everyone. Yeah.